What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome back to the channel. And if you already saw, there's almost 1,000 people that watched it. I literally dropped probably about 30 minutes ago just a video talking about potentially the Philadelphia Eagles hiring Nick Sirianni as their new head coach. Talked about hypotheticals, about maybe trading Carson Wentz to the Colts and everything that's going on. And then within the video being up for 30 minutes, they officially announced Nick Sirianni as the new head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's talk about that now. So I just scrapped the video because I talked about in that video that if they do hire Sirianni, we'll have to come back with a little bit more in-depth video and my opinion on it. That's what this is. Obviously, kind of quickly rushing to get some notes here. And in terms of like game plans and what kind of schemes and stuff like that we're going to see from Sirianni, I don't have anything on that quite just yet. Maybe we'll have that in the coming days or so. But I just want to look at it big picture. We have a new man in charge here in Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni, 39 years old, was the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Didn't call plays. That's something that is worth of note. But he's our guy. He's our guy with a history. And I mean, we got to say right off the bat, we're a little disappointed on the C4 channel that we didn't get Joe Brady. And I think ultimately it's probably down to experience. I mean, Sirianni, 39 years old, not old by any means. Definitely on the younger side for head coaches. But you look at Joe Brady, he would have been, the youngest head coach in the NFL, has only been in the NFL for 1 year. And while I do think I kind of viewed potentially hiring Joe Brady as I'd rather be a year early than a year too late and not even have a chance of signing him, there is still a massive gamble about someone like Joe Brady going from really like 1 year at LSU, 1 year at Carolina. And if he's truly not a prodigy and you have to have a couple more years of in the NFL, I mean, he could be completely out of his depth, trying to control the locker room, trying to run all that stuff. And if that was obvious, clear and obvious in the interviews, then, it probably is best not to go with him, I guess. Even though, to this point, and I might as well make the statement now, I'm not saying Sirianni's a bad hire, but didn't really know a whole lot about him until 2-3 days ago, until his name started popping up in interviews. I still think Joe Brady would have been my hire for the next Philadelphia Eagles head coach. But we have Sirianni. Let's make some sense out of it. First of all, I definitely want Colts fans. Let me know in the comment section below how you feel about this hire, because that was like kind of the first gauging of if this is an interesting hire or not, because every time I ask about Colt fans about Sirianni, they're like, don't take him. Leave him alone. We don't want you poaching him and stuff like that. I'd rather that than when you look at Patriot fans talking about Josh McDaniels, you're like, oh, have fun with McDaniels. Yeah, he'll be back in another year or two once you guys fire him, and I'll be right in the world. So you kind of always want to see, even comes down to like free agent stuff like that. When you see opposing teams upset that that person is leaving, you should get a good feeling like, oh, maybe he actually is not too bad. And especially for the Philadelphia Eagles right now, where a lot of fans are uncertain about the judgment of Jeffrey Lurie, uncertain for sure about the judgment of Howie Roseman, from various reasons, from draft, from firing Doug Peterson, from everything that happened, having them make this decision, go with the new head coach. It's shaky. It's nervous. It's uncertain for a lot of Eagle fans because these guys are fucking clueless. They look clueless. So should we trust their opinion or not? And they've decided to go Sirianni, and let's try to make some sense about this. So in his career, before he became the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts with Frank Reich in 2018, he started off really in the NFL as the Kansas City Chiefs assistant quarterback coach, and then in 2012 he was their wide receivers coach. So the quarterback that he was working with was Matt Castle. I think they won 10 wins, though, that year. And then the wide receivers, the best of the bunch, were Steve Breston, who already had some success with the Arizona Cardinals. And then they got Dexter McCluster, who was pretty much a utility player. So there was no one really to write home about in his time in Kansas City. Then he went into San Diego to become the quarterback coach there and eventually the wide receivers coach. So the quarterback, obviously in San Diego, was Phillip Rivers. And you look at some of the wide receivers, here's where you get a little bit more optimistic. We're not going to necessarily say Keenan Allen, because Keenan Allen's very good. I don't think he needed a lot of coaching up. But we had Dontrell Inman, had 800 yards one of the years that Sirianni was a wide receiver coach there. And Inman, just a guy, but almost fringe 1,000-yard receiver. That's intriguing. He had back-to-back breakout years for Tyrell Williams. That so far is probably his best body of work. Tyrell Williams' success went from a very small school player, pretty sure he was a UDFA, and I think back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for him. And then he eventually cashed out, went to free agency. Is now a member of the Raiders. But all right, we have a success project. But that doesn't always mean anything. Mike Groh had a couple big years with Alshon Jeffrey in Chicago. Didn't mean that he was the right guy in Philadelphia. Didn't mean he was the right OC in Philadelphia. So, it's a small body of work, but at least there are some success stories, and we're not trying to bank it off of whatever you did with the Kansas City Chiefs. So then he became the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis under Frank Reich. 2018 with Andrew Luck, they were 5th in yards, 6th in the league in passing yards, but 20th rushing. So they were a very one-dimensional offense, did not have that bounce. Andrew Luck retired, so in 2019 they had that revolving door at quarterback. They finished 25th in passing yards, 25th in total yards, 29th in passing yards, but 7th in rushing yards. So they were able to kind of understand, and this is a positive here, I was like, all right, quarterback kind of sucks, so let's run the ball. We have to shift whatever identity we think we want to have on offense. We have to shift that for the players that we have. That has been an issue that we've had in Philadelphia. It feels like in Philadelphia, don't have to look any more further than Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson wanted to coach his offense. He was not necessarily coaching to the players that he had. That was a massive issue on the defensive side of the ball with Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz constantly would want to run Jim Schwartz's defense, no matter how many injuries we had at corner, no matter how bad our linebackers were. It was Jim Schwartz's offense, and he refused to tailor his scheme and his defense to the players that we had. So understanding that this is a culture that our new head coach has is, I know what I want to run, but if I can't run that, I'm going to try to maximize what we do have. That is a good change in culture from what we've had in Philadelphia with Doug Peterson, with Jim Schwartz, and it's my way or the highway. And now that's not completely fair to Doug Peterson, because when we had injuries, when we had to put backup quarterbacks in, Doug would kind of tailor things. He tailored things to Nick Foles. He tailored things to Jalen Hurts a little bit. But ultimately, with the $100 million guy was under the center, we were running a faulty offense, and we just refused to change, and the personnel was bad. And I take what I saw in 2019 from this Colts team as that is a big positive for this Eagles squad. They are going to get a coach that will work with what he has around him, which is also kind of good because we don't have a lot of salary cap. We do not have an opportunity to make big-time moves to fix this roster. You have to work with what we currently have, and if Sirianni has any history with the Colts, he can work with what he has. And then looking at 2020, the most recent body of work for Sirianni in Indianapolis, the Colts this year were 10th in yards, 11th in passing yards, 11th in rushing yards. So very much a top 10 offense on the outer side. That's good. Poaching a top 10 offensive coordinator is always very important. It might not be the most sexy of the hires. I do personally at this point feel like it was definitely better than Josh McDaniels. Better than going defensive like Todd Bowles. He's a name still out there. I'm not 100% sold on Bieniemy. You know my feelings on Deuce Staley. If these were the candidates, if you told me right now, we could have got Sirianni, who I, up till 3 days ago, didn't even consider him as a head coaching candidate. Josh McDaniels, Deuce Staley, or Eric Bieniemy. Now knowing what I know with Sirianni, I probably honestly would lean that way, if I'm being completely honest with you. So we know what he's done as an offensive coordinator, statistically, full body of work with the Indianapolis Colts. So what about development? Because development is very important, because that has been an area that Philadelphia has been absolutely starved of over the last couple of years. Name a player that's developed in Philadelphia really on either side of the ball since we've won the Super Bowl. Miles Sanders. Our O-line, because we have Jeff Stoutland, right? Mylott has been pretty goddamn good. I would argue Dallas Goedert hasn't really, he's still good. There's still a high optimism, Dallas Goedert being our tight end of the future for sure. But there could be arguments made that, you're not seeing the rapid growth that you'd like to see out of Dallas Goedert. None of our wide receivers have developed. We've seen regression in Carson Wentz. So literally on the offensive side of the ball, in terms of development, Miles Sanders, maybe. Miles Sanders in the offensive line. And there's still a good chance that we retain Deuce Staley. Maybe not a good chance for Deuce Staley, but a good chance we retain Jeff Stoutland. So we keep those guys that have actually have success developing players on the offensive side of the ball in the building. But generally speaking, not enough development. So what has Sirianni done in terms of development? Well, in 2018, now some of this ultimately with the development, I'm not going to throw in Quentin Nelson. Much like I'm not going to give him credit for Keenan Allen while he's in San Diego, I'm not going to throw in Quentin Nelson. Can't miss player. Day one, all pro. But looking at 2018, Naheem Hines, Darius Fountain, and Deion Kane were the players that they drafted. Not so much from Fountain and Kane, even though I personally like those picks. I probably would have brought both those guys in, because Fountain was one of the best small school wide receivers, and Deion Kane was coming off an injury, but there's a lot of optimism that he was going to be one of the next solid Clemson wide receivers in the NFL. But looking at Naheem Hines, came in as a mid-round gadget player. We saw last year, that guy is an absolute stud. Naheem Hines and Jonathan Taylor was a phenomenal young 1-2 punch at running back that I think is only going to get better throughout the stretch. So I'm going to give him credit for Naheem Hines in 2018. Also that year, as an OC, Andrew Luck and Eric Ebron made the Pro Bowl. That's good. They know his name's attached right to those guys for their success that year. 2019, Paris Campbell was the big offensive player that they got, and that actually wasn't particularly great. A little bit of a knock there, but that year he still found a way to get Jack Doyle into the Pro Bowl, so there's some kudos. And then in 2020, very promising so far. Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor are the big investments, and they look great. Michael Pittman has all the bodies of work to be a potential wide receiver 1 in the NFL from what little that we saw, but I think he's going to enter next year as a very legitimate wide receiver 2. Jonathan Taylor looks like a franchise running back. They got Jacob Eason as a developmental. We don't really know what's going on there. Obviously, the lack of preseason games actually hurt them out, but there's a chance that they could feel good about Jacob Eason enough that they're not going to splurge big on quarterback this year. So, and they also got Desmond Patton late, just more so depth. I mean, it's the 7th round wide receiver. So, looking at his body of work and development in his 3 years, obviously, again, we talked about this, it doesn't solely fall on Sirianni. Frank Reich has a lot of control of this, as well as an exceptional general manager in Chris Ballard. I'm hoping Sirianni learns something somehow from Ballard so that he can kind of be combative a little bit with Howie Roseman. When you see Howie Roseman doing a dumb decision, I would love to see Sirianni's head be like, what would Chris Ballard do? What would Chris, like, that's something that could be positive. But I'm looking at this, Nyheim Hines, Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor. I'll take that. That bodes well for development because most of those guys, none of those guys were first rounders. But Nyheim Hines, mid-round pick. Michael Pittman was a second. I think Jonathan Taylor was a second as well. But none of those were premier picks, and he got the most out of them. So that should give us some reassurances that, like, yeah, he's developed players, going back with Tyrell Williams as well. So that's good. Maybe that's going to mean a career resurgence for Jalen Reagor, for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He's had success with tight ends, so if we do decide to move on from Zach Ertz, which is most likely, Dallas Goedert. Bodes well for Dallas Goedert. But the biggest thing is obviously going to be, can Sirianni salvage Carson Wentz? I think, given the fact that we hired him, that seems very much like a pro-Wentz hire. Bringing in Sirianni does not spell that we're going to try to trade Carson Wentz. It seems like maybe it'll be more likely that we try to trade Jalen Hurts. And again, I keep thinking about trading. If I'm the Saints, even if I'm a Saints fan, you don't have a lot of picks this year, I would 100% try to trade for Jalen Hurts. If I'm Philadelphia, I'd 100% be looking like, give me your second round. Give me a second round and a conditional pick. Jalen Hurts is your guy. Because you're the Saints, they want Taysom Hill a little bit, and you get a better version of Taysom Hill in Jalen Hurts, and he's going to be cheaper than what's going to cost you to retain Jameis Winston. I just think that is the best situation if I'm the Saints. And obviously I'm biased because I'm coming from an Eagles standpoint that wants to offload Jalen Hurts and reclaim some assets there. But, I've seen this, I think it was Reddit, kicked around on Reddit, but it's like, Sirianni, his guy so far in the NFL has been Phillip Rivers. And if you can work with Phillip Rivers from an outside looking in, Phillip Rivers looks like one of the biggest dicks in the NFL. Looks like a very, I don't want to say difficult, but he looks like a difficult quarterback to work with. Looks like people would have issues working with Phillip Rivers. So this reputation that Carson Wentz is kind of gained around the building in Philadelphia, and depending on who you lead from the beat reporters, it sounds like, he's kind of an asshole. Him and Doug Peterson not have a great relationship. Sirianni has a reputation of excelling with quarterbacks that are difficult to work with. So, and as much as I'm a nothing guy when it comes to Phillip Rivers. A lot of people are like, Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer, he's this and that. I'm just, I'm kind of lukewarm on Phillip Rivers, but you can look at a guy that, he so much respect, so much of his, work ethic and reputation around the league is respected. And Sirianni saw that firsthand for so many years. That can tap into saving Carson Wentz. So I do think from a standpoint of salvaging Wentz, Sirianni is a very interesting and intriguing hire. Other thoughts, I guess on this is he didn't call plays, but Doug Peterson, for the most part, when he was the OC in Kansas City, didn't call plays either. Frank Reich didn't call plays while he was here in Philadelphia, and he got the head coaching job. And generally speaking, he's been a very good head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm not super worried about the lack of play calling ability because you can if you're worried in Philadelphia, you can hire a veteran OC. He's a Frank Reich disciple. It'd be hard to not read between the lines of like, Philly did, we lost Frank Reich because of the whole Josh McDaniels situation, and now we fired Doug Peterson. This kind of seems like it's, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman being like, man, I kind of think we messed up. I kind of think even though there's no way that we would ever have kept Frank Reich over Doug Peterson, it's kind of like ever since Frank Reich left the building, that's been what this Eagles team is missing. So we're going back to that Frank Reich coaching tree here, and we want to get a little bit of that back. We want to bring it back. We went with Peterson when in reality it was Frank Reich. And we're getting that back a little bit. The last question, really, and it's something that will be very intriguing going forward, is now that we got 39-year-old Sirianni's never called plays. What is this coaching staff going to look like? At least from the big picture. Who's going to be his OC? Who's going to be his DC? And sure, Philadelphia, they might push, hey, interview Deuce, right? I hope we can keep Deuce just to keep with the running backs. I hope we keep Jeff Stoutland with the offensive line. That'd be actually a top priority. If Jeff Stoutland's getting ready to leave, I'd be like, he's already our run game coordinator. I would honestly interview Jeff Stoutland to be our potential OC. But ideally, if we can just keep him as the O-line coach. There's options here. We have Marcus Brady, who's the Indianapolis Colts quarterback coach. I don't know where it was. I saw a rumor that someone wants to bring him in for an OC job. Hopefully Philadelphia, now with the Sirianni hiring, we can bring him with us if that's who his top candidate is. Pep Hamilton's still out there. I've talked about in depth how I think Pep Hamilton would very much be a worthy coordinator for Philadelphia. But again, we don't know what Sirianni, I don't know super in depth what his coaching tree is, who his buddies are. Does he share an agent with any potential coordinators that could come here in Philadelphia? But I do think from out of this, because he's obviously going to have, he's an offensive guy, an idea of who he wants to bring in offensively. And defensively, you can look through the entire Colts coaching staff and be like, well, we're just going to pick one of these guys. Our linebacker coach probably would be pretty good. Colts was an electrifying defense. You probably can't mess up too much picking from that tree. But again, I digress to what happened when Philadelphia brought in Doug Peterson. We brought in Doug Peterson, but hand in hand with that move, because he was inexperienced and didn't have all this stuff, we brought in Jim Schwartz, who was a former head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. We prioritized having some sort of veteran coach in the building. And I think, again, I go back to my top DC hire. If I'm Sirianni, Marvin Lewis is my defensive coordinator. That is the guy we need. We need a guy that has that experience, that can help right the ship, but it is also a damn good coordinator. A damn good coordinator that I think would excel with the players that we have in place. So, that would be my dream now. Sirianni is our guy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No Joe Brady. That pipe dream has sailed. But I think we can find a way to build an all-star coaching staff around him. It's easier said than done, especially because we're a little bit later than all these other teams that already got their new head coaches. But that was paramount for Doug Peterson's success. Very similar starting points, Sirianni and Doug Peterson. But when Doug Peterson came here, we built an all-star coaching staff around him. All-star. Feels weird calling, Jim Schwartz an all-star. But at that time, that was a A-tier coaching staff. I think we have to do the same here. And I would look at Pep Hamilton, Marvin Lewis, or Marcus Brady. Those would be the guys. So let me know in the comment section below, fellas, what do we think about Nick Sirianni becoming the new Philadelphia Eagles head coach? Who do you want to see him bring in as the offensive coordinator and or defensive coordinator? And what do you think this means for Carson Wentz and the Eagles going forward? Let me know in the comment section below. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm working out behind the scenes right now with a new college football revamped rebuild. It's going to be a good one. Make sure you stay tuned to your sub boxes for that. And see you guys back in the next one. Sirianni to the Eagles. Let's go. Got our man.